What's up, guys? It's your boy Zawoki back at it with another Chris Watts video. And today, this one's kind of weird. It's talking about a red truck. Also, the whole gym thing and so forth. I'm on the fence with the gym thing. I don't know if he was in the vicinity. I just think he had something that he wanted to do with NK, if not the threesome that they possibly partaked in. But you guys wanted me to look into this video, which it says Smart Chris Watts. Smart. Um, Secret Gym won't explain how they really knew too much. I'm intrigued. But we're going to watch this together and see what this is about. But first, if you guys could do me a solid favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting that wiper icon down at the bottom right. Hit the bell icon next to it. So when I do post videos like this one, you guys will get that little ring notification that I've posted that video. And then you guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, thank you so very much for the love and support that you guys show on my channel. We are creeping up to 73,000 subscribers, and remember, at 75,000 subscribers, we're going to be giving away another virtual reality headset, a Meta Quest 3. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do a Meta Quest 3 or a 3S where you can take it on the go. But once we get to 75, we're going to do that giveaway again. But with that being said, go over to truecrimearchives.s. Go give them some love, subscribe, comment, like, and share. And if you don't want to watch with me, I completely understand. Link is in the description. Go over there or go over to the channel, watch the video. But for those that want to watch with me, let's get into the video.
In question. His name is Jim. You've probably never heard of him.
That's not Jim. I don't think this is Jim, because this doesn't look like Jim.
What if the person who knew the most was never even questioned? His name is Jim.
This doesn't look like the Jim that I've seen. This just looks like another random dude.
You've probably never heard of him. And that's exactly the problem. While police built their case, while the world watched one man go to prison, someone else stayed in the shadows. Someone who had access. Someone who knew things. Someone who was connected to the key witness in ways that nobody can explain.
I would say the music is a little loud, my dude.
This isn't the Chris Watts story you've been told. This is about the man they protected. The man they let walk away. The man who's never had to answer a single hard question. Many people ask why the Chris Watts story...
And no, like Jen said on her channel, Dead Crime... Is it Dead? I can't remember. She changed her Deadline Crime YT... stated that he's not hiding. He has nothing to hide, which I pretty much agree with, because I think he was just in it with Nichol to get his jollies off. He was like the guy friend that she could boink whenever she wanted to, or he was game for. Again, we can't really find a lot of information about Jim, but let's see what this video says.
Remains in the news. Why people wants the case to be reopened. And I always tell them his actions deeply hurt his family and touched the hearts of parents and families everywhere, leaving so much sadness that we all feel. As humans, we want to understand the pain and loss caused by this tragedy. To keep exploring this case with care and find answers about Chris Watts' life and whoever is involved in this, please subscribe to this channel. Even though it's harder getting this information, but your support helps me dig in and share more details respectfully. Why is Jim protected? Who is this person?
I don't think Jim's protected.
You probably know that NK's phone became a big part of the investigation.
I did.
Police looked at her search history. They found things that seemed suspicious. Searches that had been deleted. Information that was wiped clean. But here's what most people don't know. Jim's phone was never examined the same way. His records...
Because they were supposed to leave Jim alone.
...were never pulled.
I've literally been watching the first 48 because it's free now on Amazon Prime. And the amount of people that says, oh, you don't need to look at this person or they were involved. And the detectives are like, oh, we're going to talk to him. And they're like, why? They weren't involved. And they go, oh, we're going to talk to him. And they talk to him. And guess what? Some of them were involved. It's like, why did they not do that with this guy?
His search history was never looked at. His text messages were never analyzed. And that's really strange, because Jim was talking to NK during the same time period.
And then it's funny that, you know, how you see like the police, or not the police, the phone records. You see it's like Nichol and Chris, Nichol and Chris, Nichol and Chris, a lot before up until the murders. And you'll see sometimes Nichol and Jim. Um, but you'll see most of it is with Nichol and Chris, Nichol and Chris, Nichol and Chris. But then right after Chris gets convicted and pretty much arrested, it's Nichol and Jim, Nichol and Jim, Nichol and Jim. Jim's pretty much sounds like the rebound dude.
They were in contact.
Again, all alleged, all my opinions, not fact.
They were meeting. They were spending time together at work and maybe outside work too. So why wasn't his phone part of the investigation?
Why wasn't he talked to?
Look at the dates.
Because apparently he was the, what do they call it? The alibi. Nichol said she was with Jim. But no, leave him alone. What?
In the weeks before everything happened, there are several times where Jim and NK were together. Work meetings, sure. But also other times. Times that other people at work noticed, but that never made it into any report. And here's what keeps bothering people who study this case closely. There were 3 phone calls. 3 calls between Jim and NK that were deleted from her phone. We know they happened because phone companies keep records. But what was actually said, the actual conversation, gone. NK deleted them. Why would she do that? What was said in those calls that needed to be erased? And why didn't anyone ever ask Jim about them? When police investigate
because they were supposed to leave Jim alone.
Something like this, they usually talk to everyone. Everyone who might know something. Everyone who was close to the people involved. Everyone who might have seen or heard anything important. Other people at work were questioned. Some spent hours being interviewed. Their phones were checked. Their stories were verified. But not Jim. His story was never really checked. His timeline was never really confirmed. He gave a basic statement, and that was it. Now maybe you're thinking...
Basic statement? I don't know about that one. There's no record of Jim being questioned.
Well, maybe there was no reason to question him more. Maybe he just didn't know anything. But that doesn't make sense. Because Jim and NK weren't just casual work friends. They had a real connection. The kind where you talk about personal stuff. Where you know what's going on in each other's lives. And NK was going through something huge. She was involved with a married man. A man with a pregnant wife. A complicated...
Then why did she Google threesomes and preparing for booty stuff? Just saying.
Intense situation. Are you telling me she never talked to Jim about it? Never mentioned it? Never asked for advice? That doesn't add up. People who worked with them say they saw Jim and NK together all the time. Having quiet conversations.
She gave him a key, she said.
Meeting during breaks. Talking in ways that seemed private.
The only people that had keys to Nichol's place was Jim and Chris.
So what were they talking about? And why did nobody think it was important to ask? Here's another piece that doesn't fit. In the days right after Chris was arrested, when the whole world was watching, Jim took time off work. He disappeared for a while. Nobody knows where he went. Nobody asked. It's just another detail that got buried. But think about this. The investigation happened fast. Chris confessed. He took a deal. The case closed. But was it thorough? Were all the questions asked? Were all the leads followed? Or did investigators decide early what the story was and ignore anything that didn't fit? Because Jim doesn't fit the simple story. Jim makes things complicated. And maybe that's exactly why he was never investigated. But here's the thing about
No, because Nichol said, leave Jim alone.
truth. It doesn't go away just because you ignore it. And the more you look at Jim's connection to this case, the more questions come up. Questions about his relationship with NK. Questions about what he knew and when he knew it. Questions about why he was left alone when everyone else was looked at closely. And those questions lead somewhere even more disturbing. What if Jim's involvement goes deeper than anyone wanted to admit? What if there's a reason he was kept out of the spotlight? What if his relationship with NK was something that would change how we understand everything? Hold that thought,
Okay.
because what I discovered about their relationship is going to make you question everything.
But I really want to see the documentation that supports this, because we could sit there and say that this entire time that Nichol was doing this, and this, but you have to have the supporting documents though too.
And it starts with what other people saw.
Again, this is how rumors start.
People who worked right next to them every single day. As an investigative reporter and a parent myself, this was one of the hardest and touching pieces of case I've ever had to research. Please subscribe. It encourages me to keep bringing you more details about this case. We're committed to bringing you the truth, even when it's heartbreaking. When you work with people every day, you notice things. You see who talks to who. You see who takes breaks together. You notice who seems closer than everyone else. And the people who worked with Jim and NK notice something.
So they're saying that NK worked with Jim. And I've seen some stuff about Jim's work history, but it doesn't say that he worked at Anadarko. But was he a third party hiree? I don't know, because I'm not putting it on here because I don't want anything bad to come to Jim, like anything that would hurt his job or family life, whatever he has. But looking at some of the work history that I've seen on LinkedIn, he's in the same field as NK of geosciences and so forth. So it's just interesting to see that. But then hearing that they would possibly work together, but there's not like hard evidence that shows that they work together. I don't know. Do you think they work together or not?
Several co-workers mentioned it. Not in official police statements, but in conversations later, online, in forums where people were trying to understand what happened. They said Jim and NK were always together, that they had a connection that seemed like more than regular friendship, that there was something there that other people picked up on. Now, I'm not saying it was romantic. I'm not making that claim, but their relationship was close enough that people noticed. Close enough that it stood out. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Jim and NK knew each other before Chris even came into the picture.
That's true.
Their friendship didn't start because of what happened.
Apparently, too, Jim is also friends with Nicole's dad.
It was already there, already built. So when NK started seeing Chris, Jim knew about it from the beginning. He was one of the first people to know. Maybe the very first. Think about what that means. Jim watched this whole situation develop. He knew Chris was married. He knew about the family. He knew everything. And he was right there, talking to NK, listening to her, being part of her life during one of the most complicated situations you can imagine.
We've seen the phone calls.
But nobody ever asked him what he saw.
She'll get off the phone with Chris, and then she'll call Jim. She'll get off the phone with Jim, and then she'll call Chris. She'll do that back and forth. She's done it multiple times.
What he thought, what advice he might have given, what conversations they had about Chris and what was going to happen. Why not? Here's something else. At work, There were meetings that happened before everything fell apart. Small meetings where Jim and NK were both there. Projects they worked on together. Times when they were alone in offices or conference rooms. Other coworkers remember seeing them together during the same time when NK was involved with Chris. They remember thinking it was odd how much time those two spent together. How they seemed to have their own private conversations. But when police came to interview people at the company, those observations never made it into the official record.
Hmm.
Why? Was it because nobody asked the right questions? Or was it because someone decided that line of investigation wasn't worth following? There's a difference between an investigation that's thorough and one that's just trying to close a case fast. A thorough
Looks good.
investigation follows every lead, asks uncomfortable questions, doesn't make assumptions. But this investigation made assumptions. They assumed Jim was just a coworker, just someone on the edges, not worth the time. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if Jim knew things that would have changed the timeline,
Let's talk to Jim.
changed how we understand what led
It's not like Jim's gonna be in trouble, but would be interesting to what Jim knows. Like, what did Nichol expose of Chris? Did she talk bad about Chris to Jim? It's like some friends will talk bad about other friends. Because that's why I don't hang out with much friends around here anymore, because people talk about you behind your back. So
to that terrible day, changed the whole story we've been told. We'll never know, because nobody asked. And here's where it gets even stranger. Jim was never formally interviewed, never sat down in an interrogation room, never had to answer hard questions under pressure. And that's not normal. Let me show you what I mean. In a case like this, police interview dozens of people, sometimes hundreds.
if,
They talk to
yeah,
family, friends,
they talked to the mailman that walked by the house.
coworkers, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something
I just used it as an example. It didn't really happen.
or heard something or knows something. And those interviews aren't casual chats. They're recorded. They're documented. They happen in formal settings where people understand how serious it is. Now let's look at who was interviewed in this case. Chris's co-workers were interviewed.
Yep.
Some spent hours answering questions about his marriage, his behavior, anything unusual. And Kay was interviewed over and over, multiple times. Long sessions where police went through every detail of her relationship.
Fake interviews, I do believe. Those interviews of NK were there to put on the act that, oh, I'm so upset about this. I'm a victim. Please, somebody help me. I'm the victim's advocate. I've been through so much. Really?
Relationship with Chris, her phone activity, where she was on specific days. Chris's neighbors were interviewed. People who barely knew the family were brought in to answer questions. Even people who had brief interactions with Chris in the days before were tracked down and questioned. But Jim? Nothing. There's no record of a formal interview. No recording. No detailed statement. Nothing beyond a quick conversation that basically went, "Do you know anything?" And no. Here's what makes that so strange.
But where's that phone call? That's the thing I need to see.
Jim had more information than almost anyone else involved in this case. He was friends with NK. He worked with Chris.
I don't know if he worked with Chris, but I wonder if Nichol and Jim and Chris hung out at the same time.
He was there during the time when everything was happening. If you were investigating, wouldn't you want to talk to him?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to know what he saw and heard? Wouldn't you want his perspective? Of course you would. Any good investigator would. So why didn't it happen? I've talked to people who work in law enforcement, retired detectives, people who've investigated serious cases.
And the ones that I've talked to, there's been a couple I've talked to for hours, and they have literally said that they would have talked to Jim no matter what. They don't care what NK would have said.
cases for decades. And when I tell them about Jim, when I explain his connection and the fact that he was never really questioned, they're shocked. They say that's not how it works. That's not procedure.
Nope.
That's not following the basics. They say someone made a choice to leave Jim alone, a choice not to dig deeper, a choice to keep him out of the story. But why would someone make that
Why?
choice? Maybe investigators just missed it. They were so focused on Chris that they didn't see the other threads worth pulling. But that's hard to believe. These weren't small-town cops working their first case. These were experienced
CBI.
professionals on a case with national attention. So what's the other option? That Jim was protected. Now,
No.
before you think I'm talking about some big conspiracy, let me be clear. I'm not saying there were secret meetings and hidden agendas. But I'm saying that sometimes in investigations, people make decisions about what to pursue and what to drop. And those decisions can be influenced by things beyond just evidence. Maybe Jim had connections. Maybe he knew the right people. Maybe there were reasons why looking into his relationship with NK would complicate things in ways investigators didn't want. Or maybe, and this is what bothers me most, maybe protecting Jim was part of getting NK to cooperate. Think about it.
I think that Nichol was protecting Jim by not being interviewed, because the alibi would have unraveled and it would have showed crime spotlight on Nichol. So if I protect Jim, I protect myself, is what I think she was thinking.
NK was a key witness. Her testimony was crucial
A witness to what?
to the case against Chris. If she was involved with Jim in any way that might look bad, might raise questions, might hurt her credibility, then protecting Jim protects her. And protecting her means the case against Chris stays simple and clean. But is that justice? Is that truth? Or is that just closing a case fast without worrying about loose ends? Here's what we know for sure. Other people connected to this case were treated very differently than Jim. NK's other friends were
The other people were treated differently than NK. I mean, the babysitter, the detailed questions that they asked her compared to Nichole's interviews, wow. They were hard. It seemed like they were harder on the babysitter with questions like, what color? When did this happen? What kind of pizza? What it's like, and then NK, it was like, oh, what color is the sky? Oh, it's, I don't know. I can't remember. Like, what?
questioned. Her family was questioned. People she barely knew were questioned. But Jim, who she talked to regularly, who she worked with every day, who knew about her relationship with Chris, he got a pass. And nobody can explain why. Legal experts I've talked to say this is highly unusual. They say in a case with this much attention, this much public interest, you don't leave obvious witnesses unquestioned unless
They would have talked to everyone, including Jim. That, like, there's investigators that said if it was around the mail delivery time, or if there was garbage taken out that morning, they would have interviewed the garbage man that took the trash out. They would have, if somebody ran by the house for their morning jog, they would have interviewed them. Like, but you're not going to interview Jim because he is connected to NK, which on the phone registry they talked a lot, and the same time around the murder time frame.
there's a specific reason. So what was the reason? Was it a mistake? Was it deliberate? Was it something in between? We don't know. Because nobody in law enforcement has ever addressed it. They've never explained why Jim wasn't investigated. They've never justified the decision. And that silence says a lot. Because when investigators do their job right, they can explain every decision.
And they can't explain this.
They can tell you why they pursued certain leads and not others. But when there's just silence, when there's no explanation, you have to wonder what they're not telling you. Drop a red flag emoji in the comments if you're seeing the same problems I'm seeing.
No need.
Because we're not done yet.
I have a red.
Not even close. If you think what I've told you so far is suspicious, Wait until you hear what Jim did the day after they found the bodies.
I want to see.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone you care about get involved with the wrong person?
Yes.
Someone you knew was bad for them?
Yes.
Someone who was lying or leading them into a situation that could only end badly?
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Pissed
Most people
off.
would say frustrated, maybe
Frustrated.
angry, protective. Now imagine you're Jim. You're close friends with NK. Really close. You spend time together every day. You talk about everything.
And you can't tell me this, okay? Us guys, it's statistically proven that every 5, or not every 5, well, I think it is. Every 5 minutes, we're thinking about booty. It's in our DNA. Is it appropriate at times? No, it's not. But you cannot tell me for 1 second that Jim and Nichol didn't hook up a few times, or Jim was constantly thinking about NK and the ways that he could probably get in her underoos. So there's no way, okay? I don't know what it is. I mean, not all of my friends, women friends, have I thought in that way. But of course, if I find one of my friends attractive back when I was younger, of course I'm going to try to, hey, would you like to go on a date? Would you like to hang out? If things led to other avenues. But you can't tell me with them hanging out, they were just having tea and crumpets or watching Friends and not doing anything on the couch. Like, you can't tell me that. There's no way.
And then she gets involved with Chris, a married man.
And that pissed Jim off because he wasn't the normal get some.
A man with a pregnant wife at home. A man who's lying to everyone. And you have to watch it happen. You have to hear about it. You have to be there while your friend falls deeper into this situation that, can't end well. How would that make you feel? Would you just be concerned? Would you try to warn her? Or would it be something more? Something stronger? Something that starts to look like jealousy? I'm not saying that's what happened.
Well, there's jealousy with Nichol and Shanann. Nichol was pissed off and jealous that she was not the main woman. So Chris comes in, budges himself in between Nichol and Jim. He's going to get a little pissed off, just saying.
But it's a question worth asking. Because the relationship between Jim and NK wasn't normal coworker stuff. It was closer, more personal. And when you add Chris,
all alleged, by the way,
into that picture, you create what relationship experts call a triangle. 3 people connected in ways that create tension and competition and complicated feelings. And triangles like that can be dangerous. Let me tell you what people who worked with all 3 of them noticed. They said before NK got involved with Chris, Jim was always around her. Always available. Always ready to help. But after Chris came into the picture, things changed. Jim was still around, but there was tension. People noticed he seemed bothered when NK talked about Chris. That he would make comments. Small things. Questions about whether she was sure about what she was doing. What coworkers said. Not to police, but to each other. In conversations later, when people were trying to make sense of everything, they said Jim didn't like Chris. That there was something competitive between them. That you could feel it when they were in the same room. Now, maybe that was just Jim being protective of his friend. Maybe he saw Chris for what he was and didn't like seeing NK get hurt.
What, married?
But maybe it was something else. Maybe Jim wanted NK for himself. Maybe watching her with Chris was painful in a way that went beyond friendship. Maybe he was waiting for the whole thing to fall apart so he could be there. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying it's
highly possible. Plausible, sorry.
Possible. And in an investigation, possible means it should be looked at. But it wasn't. Nobody ever asked Jim about his feelings toward NK. Nobody explored whether there was jealousy or...
It would have been interesting if they had an interview. Did you have feelings for NK? Did you know about Chris? Why can't we talk to him?
Anything else that might have motivated him. And that's a problem. Because if Jim had feelings for NK, If he was jealous, that changes everything about how we understand his involvement.
Yes, it does.
It means he had a reason to care deeply about what was happening, a reason to maybe insert himself into the situation in ways that mattered. And when you have motive and opportunity and access, you have someone who should be investigated. But he
Do I think that Jim partaked in the murders? No. Did I think that he probably did not like Chris? Plausible.
wasn't. 3 people who worked with all of them told the same story independently. They said Jim was jealous. They said he didn't hide it well. They said everyone could see it except maybe in Kay herself. And yet none of that ever made it into the investigation. Why? Because nobody asked. Because investigators
And NK said, leave Jim alone.
decided early this was a simple case. Man has a fare. Man doesn't want to lose his girlfriend or deal with his family. Man does something terrible. That's the story. That's what fit. That's what was easy. But what if the real story was more complicated? What if there were other people who influenced what happened? What if Jim's jealousy played a role we've never understood? We'll never know.
No,
Because that investigation never happened. And that brings us to the evidence. The actual evidence that could have answered these questions but was never examined. In modern investigations, digital evidence is everything. Phone records, text messages, internet searches, GPS data. All of it leaves a trail. All of it tells a story. And investigators are supposed to follow those trails wherever they lead. So let's talk about the
I mean, heck, DA Rourke even said Nichol hampered the investigation by what her actions did, by deleting messages, photos, contact of Chris Watts. Hampering is a big word.
trails that were never followed. Jim's phone, never fully examined. His text messages with NK were never pulled and analyzed. His call logs were never compared to the timeline. His location data was never checked. Why? If you're investigating and someone has regular contact with a key witness, you get their phone records. That's basic. But it didn't happen. Now maybe you're thinking,
And we've looked at the phone records. We have seen that she was talking to Jim right after Chris. And then, like I said before, then she would call Chris, and then she would call Jim, and then she would call Chris, and then she would call Jim, and then she'd call her mother, and then her dad, and then Chris again, and then Jim, and then her sister, and then their Jim, and then Chris. It was like literally almost the same people every single day. And the one day that she didn't text Chris or Jim, the day of the murders. Why?
well, maybe they did look and found nothing. Maybe they checked and he was clear.
Then show us that and we'll stop. But you don't want to show us. You're like, no, you can't see it. Like you're just all like eating it. You can't see it. Sorry, it's here, but like you can't see it though. That's what they're doing. And they're like, just leave it alone. No! Give me what's in your mouth and let me see it.
But if that was true, there would be a record. There would be documentation showing investigators requested Jim's phone data, examined it, and cleared him. That
And with what Nichol saying, leave Jim alone, I highly doubt that they collected it.
documentation doesn't exist, which means either they didn't look, or they looked and decided not to document what they found. Both options are bad. Let's talk about money. In cases like this, investigators often look at finances. Did anyone make unusual purchases?
The only financial gain that I would see is that Chris wanted his family gone so he could financially be cleaned because of the insurance money. Yeah, okay, he was going to get Nichol, but he's also going to get that insurance check.
Were there payments that don't make sense? Were there financial connections that raise questions? NK's financial records were examined. Chris's were examined. But Jim's? No record of that happening. And that matters because if Jim was helping NK in any way, if there were transactions between them, if there was any financial tie, we'd never know. Because nobody looked. Then there's location data. Your phone tracks everywhere you go.
They could have looked at Jim's phone that day just to wean him out.
Cell towers ping your location. Apps track your movements. So where was Jim on the key dates? The days before. The day it happened.
Apparently at his home with NK.
The days after. We don't know. His location data was never pulled. His movements were never verified. His story was never really checked. And here's something that should bother everyone. There were items that went missing during this investigation. Evidence that was logged at first, but then couldn't be found later. Nothing major.
Like redacted?
Nothing that would have changed the case against Chris.
Oh.
But small things. Documents. Notes. Things that might have shown connections or conversations that weren't part of the official story. And some of that evidence involved Jim. There were notes from early in the investigation where officers wrote down names of people who should be interviewed. Jim's name was on those lists. But then those interviews never happened and the notes disappeared. How does that happen? Either through mistakes or on purpose. And neither is good. Forensic experts who've looked at this case say there are obvious gaps. Obvious threads that should have been pulled but weren't. Obvious questions that should have been asked. And many of those gaps are about Jim. They say a proper investigation would have included a full look at his relationship with NK. A deep dive into his communications.
It definitely would have weaned him out. Like I said before, do you have feelings for Nichol? Were you intimate with Nichol? Did you have a relationship? Like, were you friends? Benefits? Like, come on. Is that why she Googled 3 ways and butt stuff? Like, come on.
A thorough check of his story and movements. They say the fact that none of that happened suggests the investigation was either rushed or deliberately limited. And when you're dealing with something this serious, neither is acceptable. Here's what gets me. The evidence still exists. Phone records exist.
Or it's deleted.
Financial records exist. The data is out there. But nobody's looking at it. Nobody's asking for it. Nobody's demanding that these obvious gaps be filled. And that tells you something about how the system works. Once a case is closed, once someone's in prison, once the public moves on, there's no reason to go back and ask uncomfortable questions. Even when those questions need to be asked. Even when the answers might change everything. Comment below. Write investigate Jim if you think law enforcement made mistakes here. Because I want to know how many of you are seeing what I'm seeing. We're not done. Not even close. Because the most damning evidence isn't what we found. It's what was deliberately destroyed. And that's where this gets even darker. You know what's interesting? The Chris Watts case should be closed. Should be one of those cases where everyone knows what happened. Justice was served.
Agreed. Nothing
Nothing left to question. But it's not. Instead, it's one of the most discussed, most debated, most analyzed cases in recent memory. There are forums about it. Social media groups with thousands of members. People spending hours going through documents and evidence looking for answers. Why? Because people know something's not right. They can feel it. Even if they can't say exactly what's wrong, they know the story doesn't add up. And one of the things they keep coming back to is Jim. On Reddit, there are entire threads about him. Hundreds of comments asking the same questions I'm asking. Why wasn't he investigated? What did he know? What was his relationship?
I wouldn't say that he needed to be investigated, but he needed to be talked to, interviewed. For, again, weaning him out. Or something that would have raised our eyebrows, red flags. Just saying.
Relationship with NK really like? On Twitter, people use hashtags demanding answers. Demanding someone in law enforcement explain why this obvious witness was ignored. There have been petitions. Real petitions signed by thousands asking for a more thorough investigation.
And unfortunately, petitions are not going to do anything. I've looked into it. They're not going to do anything. It shows how many people want this open. It definitely helps visually, but a petition, unless it's in the millions, yeah, it's very rare.
Asking for Jim to be questioned properly. Asking for the gaps to be filled. And the response? Silence. Law enforcement hasn't addressed it. The district attorney has gaps to be filled. And the response? Silence. Law enforcement hasn't addressed it. The district attorney hasn't addressed it. Nobody official has explained why Jim was never investigated. They just ignore the questions and hope people will move on. But people aren't moving on. Because this isn't about conspiracy theories. This isn't about making up wild stories. This is about basic facts, basic questions, basic procedures that weren't followed. And when you ignore basics, people notice.
Yep.
People get suspicious. People start to wonder what you're hiding. Journalists have tried to look into this. Real journalists. People who've covered crime for years.
Deadline Crime is one of them.
And you know what happened? They got blocked. They requested documents. Denied. They tried to interview people connected to the investigation. Refused. They reached out to Jim directly. No response. It's like there's a wall around this part of the story. A wall nobody's allowed past. And that's not how things should work. In a system that values truth and justice, you're supposed to be able to ask questions. You're supposed to be able to investigate. But in this case, all of that's been shut down. Why? Were they protecting? Who were they protecting? And what would we learn if someone actually did a proper investigation? I don't know.
I bet it would open Pandora's box of love
That's the problem.
on NK.
None of us know. Because nobody's looking. But the public pressure is building. More people are learning about this. More people are asking questions. More people are demanding someone take this seriously. And eventually, that pressure will lead somewhere.
There are people that are just finding out about this case. You know, people do grow up. People that were 11 or 10 are now 17. They're wanting to know about the case. People that were 15 are now 23 or 22. Sorry. So, I mean, they're always finding out about this case. Not everybody's on YouTube or anything like that. So they come across my videos on Facebook or Instagram and then, or somebody else's video that's online. It's like when you type in Chris Watts, I'm not the first one that's on there.
Because truth has a way of coming out. Maybe not right away. Maybe not easily. But eventually. And when it does, when someone finally investigates Jim properly, when we finally get answers, I think a lot of people will be shocked by what we learn. So let's talk about protection. Not bodyguards and security, but the kind that happens in the background, where people make decisions that shield someone from scrutiny. Jim has that kind of protection. And the question is why? One possibility is it's just about the case, about keeping it simple, about not introducing complications that might make prosecuting Chris harder. If you're a prosecutor with a clean case, a confession, overwhelming evidence, the last thing you want is some side story that muddies things. Some additional person who might raise questions. So you keep it simple. You focus on the main story. You ignore threads that don't fit. And maybe that's all this is. Maybe Jim was ignored because including him would have been messy. But there's another possibility. What if Jim has connections? What if he knows people? What if there are relationships or reasons why putting him under a microscope would create problems? I'm not talking about massive conspiracies. I'm talking about small dynamics, office politics, the kind of stuff that happens everywhere. Maybe Jim knows someone in the department. Maybe he's related to someone important. Maybe he has friends who can make decisions about who gets investigated. Or maybe, and this is what many suspect.
Well, Jim was friends with Dwayne. Just saying.
Protecting Jim was part of the deal with NK. Think about it. NK agreed to cooperate. She provided.
She didn't cooperate. She had bombshell info, which she pretty much threw Chris under the bus.
Evidence. She helped build a case against Chris. But what if part of that cooperation included an understanding that certain things wouldn't be looked at? Certain relationships wouldn't be questioned? That happens all the time. Witnesses get protection. They get deals. They get assurances that cooperating won't blow up their lives. And if NK had things she didn't want examined, things involving Jim, Then protecting him protects her credibility. It keeps the
And she didn't want her name slandered.
story clean. It keeps her
She got so mad when she found out that her name was going to be slandered. And that's the one thing she didn't want. And that pissed her off more than anything.
looking innocent. It avoids questions about whether she knew more or did more. Lawyers say this is plausible. They say it's the kind of informal agreement that happens in cases constantly, even if it's never written down. And if that's what happened, it would explain everything. Why Jim wasn't questioned. Why his phone wasn't examined. Why all those obvious steps were skipped.
Why did we have to leave him alone?
Because someone decided closing the case was more important than getting all the answers. But here's the thing. Decisions like that might solve the immediate problem. They might help you get a conviction. But they leave questions. They leave doubt. They leave people wondering what really happened. And those questions don't go away. They sit there, waiting, growing, getting harder to ignore. Someone made a decision to keep Jim out of this story. Someone decided he didn't need to be
NK.
investigated. Someone decided the questions about him weren't worth pursuing. And whoever made that decision needs to explain why. They need to justify it. They need to tell the
Yeah, their justification. Oh, don't worry about it. We got the man. Now shut up. That's literally what they want us to do.
public why basic procedures were ignored. But they won't. Because acknowledging the questions means admitting there are gaps. And admitting gaps means admitting they didn't do their job. So instead, they stay silent. They hope people will forget. They hope the case will fade and these uncomfortable questions will disappear. But that's not happening. More people are asking questions now than when the case closed. And that brings us to the one piece of evidence that could change everything.
Jim.
The one thing that, if examined properly, could reopen this entire case. There's one piece of evidence in this case that almost nobody talks about. It's not dramatic. It's not movie material. But it's significant. Really significant. And it involves Jim. In the early days, before everything focused on Chris, officers were gathering information from everyone at the company. They were building a picture of relationships, timelines, who knew what and when. And during that process, one officer
I'd still like to know how people found out about Chris and NK by sending the emails to the FBI. Like, how did they know to look at those emails? Or did they just come across them by accident? Like,
wrote a report. A short report. Just a few paragraphs. In that report, the officer noted that Jim had been in contact with NK on the morning everything happened. Not unusual by itself. They worked together. They talked regularly. But here's what makes it significant. The timing. The contact happened early.
coincidence?
Very early.
I think not.
Before most people would be awake. Before work hours. Before there was any public knowledge. And according to that report, Jim called NK. He initiated it. Why? What did he need to talk about at that hour? What was so urgent it couldn't wait? And what did they discuss? We don't know. Because that report disappeared from the official file. It was logged. Other officers saw it. It existed. But when people went through the case file later, it wasn't
And that makes you think, too, if Jim was with, or if Nichol was with Jim, why would she be calling him?
there. Gone. Maybe that's just a mistake. Maybe it got misfiled. Maybe it's sitting in a box somewhere.
Oh, very, very interesting video. I have my ups and I have my downs when it comes to this video. And if I agree to disagree, it's definitely on a lot of the high notes, if that makes sense. Like, I agreed with, I'd say about 80%, but there's like 20% that I'm like, meh. Do you have any way to prove that? Do you have any way of like showing that was factual? But some of it does make sense about why did we talk to Jim, like just to either wean him out, find out his connection with NK. I mean, heck, we found they were interviewing some people of Shanann's friends that weren't even in the area. um, like Amanda Thayer and Nick Thayer. Like, it's just, they should have talked to everybody. They say they did, but then when we want to look at that information, they tell us, oh, you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to look at it. Blah, 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 blah. So, let me know your guys' thoughts on this video. Do you agree to disagree? Do you think it's far-fetched? Do you think it's out of this world? Or is it plausible? I would love to know your thoughts down below. Jim, if you're out there, I know you probably don't want to talk about it, but I'd love to interview you. If you want to, hit up my DMs at Instagram or Facebook. I'd surely love to just talk to you for a few minutes. I don't think he's hiding either. He wasn't involved in the murders, but he probably didn't like Chris. So, again, thank you guys for being here. Please take care. Be safe. Don't forget to go over to truecrimearchives.eth, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Please take care. Be safe. As always, keep nerding on, and we will see you guys in the next video.